centers of learning, advancing mathematics, astronomy, medicine, so on, and engineering. Well, you lost? No. Not from the Muslim world, just to find their way out of the Dark Ages, and they still couldn't make it. What would Europe look like today without centuries of brutal colonial conquest? What would Canada look like, Jordan Peterson, if they hadn't wiped out the indigenous people? No, if the West had actually stayed within their borders in Europe and actually traded fairly with people, respecting the sovereignty of other nations, well, they would be nowhere near the global hegemon that they claim to be today.
Respect. Imagine that.
They'd be a backwater. So let's not pretend that this so-called moral high ground that you're standing on isn't in fact a mountain of skulls. You're standing on a mountain of bodies and calling it the moral high ground. And all the wealth that you have today belongs to those bodies. But what exactly is your definition of deserved wealth? Is it wealth that's derived from slavery, from looting, from genocide, from bombing nations into submission? Is it wealth that gets extracted by force through predatory loans and IMF austerity programs? Is it wealth that's acquired through bullying and intimidation? No, if we're starting to measure deservedness, well, then the West is sitting on the most undeserved pile of wealth in human history. It's stolen. It's blood money.
All of it.
It's the fruit of exploitation. It's the fruit of genocide.
All of it.
It's the fruit of ecological destruction. It's the fruit of oppression, injustice, and tyranny. That's why all these types, all these Jordan Peterson types, why they all rant about so-called open borders, because they don't. Why if Africans and Asians and Central and South Americans, if they want to come over to America or come over to Europe, well, they're not doing anything but coming over to where all of their own stuff has been displaced. They're coming over to the countries that were built by their own wealth.
What's
and
up?
If you had any decency, you let them in. You let them in. And you let them enjoy what their own wealth and their own resources built. And good Lord, when this man talks about Muslim countries not being so-called democracies, where do I begin? Saying that Muslim countries are authoritarian and so on, as if you have democracies in the West. As if you ever cared one bit about people's rights. As if you ever cared one bit about people's consent, about people's sovereignty.
I'm chilling.
This is what I mean. They can literally only talk to each other at this point because everyone in the world knows. Everyone in the world has suffered your vicious contempt.
Watching Middle Nation on YouTube.
Rights. Your contempt for everyone else's rights.
Shahid Bolson responds to Jordan Peterson Piers Morgan interview.
Since when did colonizers ever care about the consent of the governed? Did you get the consent of the Native Americans? Did you get the consent of enslaved Africans?
No.
Did you get the consent of India when you colonized? Did you get the consent of Algeria? Did you get the consent of Indonesia or Malaysia? Or Vietnam? Or Iraq? Or Afghanistan? Did you get the consent of Palestine? In fact,
well, there's got to be so much hate. So much hate. So much hate.
These countries are no longer kowtowing to the West. He isn't mad because they're not so-called democratic. No, he doesn't care about that. He's mad because they're no longer obedient, which is anyway what they always meant when they said democratic. What he can't stand is for countries in the Muslim world and for countries in the global South to act with independence and sovereignty. That's what he can't stand. That's what none of them can stand. And he can't stand that no one cares. Literally no one cares anymore what the West thinks. No one cares anymore what the West says. You know, he's saying that we need to have some sort of an international conference or something to have a conversation between the so-called Christian
conversation
West
about what? How to submit?
and the Muslim world. Peterson, we've been having that conversation for centuries. And you've made your point and your position exceedingly and painfully and brutally clear. You've been talking to us with guns and with bombs and with sanctions, with bullying and intimidation, and we're tired of this conversation. No, we don't need to talk anymore. We've
Big bag.
To hear from you. And we've all recognized
big bag? You got a big bag? Let me get some.
Psychopathic narcissists. As far as I'm concerned, our own countries should actually close their borders to all of you.
Yeah.
They should definitely close all of their borders to your companies. Close their borders to all of your predators, your looters, your pirates, your thieves, your grooming gangs. No, I think that there should be rigid
Terrorists.
entry restrictions in any formerly colonized country against anyone from the countries that formerly colonized them. You can't be trusted. And by your own words, you show that you don't have good intentions. You don't have goodwill towards us, and you don't have good intentions. You don't think that we deserve our prosperity. You don't think that we deserve our own resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in our lands. You make it very clear that until today, you don't think that we deserve to use our own resources for our own development.
You can't say he's wrong.
Our own success.
Fuck.
You still think that our resources belong to you. So how is anyone supposed to feel comfortable letting you around their stuff? You're kleptomaniacs. No, Jordan Peterson is calling for a dialogue with the Muslim world because that's the only way that the West can try to keep hold of the mic. BRICS has
Well,
expanded to
what do you want?
countries.
What do you want? What do you want me to do?
Of the global population. You're not in the conversation anymore. BRICS is over 55% of the entire world's population. And these countries, Saudi Arabia included, they're building themselves up. They're taking back ownership of their wealth. They're taking back ownership and sovereignty over their resources, and that's what gripes Jordan Peterson. And he wants to pretend that the West enabled that. You know, he said in that interview something about the West giving Saudi Arabia money, $1 trillion, he said. I mean, is he actually talking about Western payments for oil as if it's charity?
Pray that it gets better.
This is psychotic. Look at this mentality. He probably thinks that even the 50-50 deal that the U.S. used to have with the Saudis back before Aramco was nationalized, he probably thought that even that was unfair. What about after nationalization? He thinks Saudi Arabia is just supposed to give them the oil and thank America for the privilege. Because the West deserves everything, according to people like Jordan Peterson, always. No. 50-50 was unfair to Saudi Arabia. And in fact, it's unfair for any of your companies to take anything that they extract from our lands, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Congo or anywhere else. Yes, you should get paid for your services like anyone else. But just because you do the service of extraction, you have no claim on what you extract. Giving you anything at all is generous. Letting you take any resources that you extract is generous. I mean, do miners get a portion of the gold or the diamonds or the coal that they dig out of the earth? No.
It's fucking
Does
hypocrisy.
someone dig the well for you get to keep a portion?
Fucking crazy.
Or have a claim upon any portion or percentage of the water in that well for perpetuity? No, you've been shoving exploitation down everyone's throat for a long time. And every penny that you've gotten from that is undeserved. But alhamdulillah, things are changing.
Giovanni.
And this is why Jordan Peterson's having conniption fits. Because no one needs to take your lopsided deals anymore. Your colonialist fantasies are dead. And no amount of bitter commentaries from the likes of Jordan Peterson are going to bring them back to life. That world doesn't exist anymore. And the real world doesn't need your validation. And the global south doesn't need your permission. And they don't need your approval in order to survive. Saudi Arabia deserves their oil wealth. And every country in the global south deserves the wealth of their own resources. And Jordan Peterson, you can just cry about it. We know you're good at that. You're always ready to shed a tear for any young white men who feel disenfranchised from their undeserved supremacy. So go ahead and cry about Saudi Arabia's oil wealth that you don't get to take. Because if you took the collective tears of all the victims of the West and unleashed them upon Europe and upon America, well, there wouldn't be a single city that wasn't underwater.
Click.
Okay, so let's do a follow-up on Iran. Because I think inshallah, bi'idhnillah, it's been a long time coming. But I think we're starting to get to the good part. Inshallah, ya Rab. Anyone who's been following the nation for some time will know that will know how I have explained the situation with Iran, what's going on there, and they'll recognize by now that explanation has proven to be accurate, alhamdulillah. I have to say, a lot of people, subhanAllah, a lot of people have spent the last year, and in fact the last 3 years, in a state of doom and gloom, constant doom and gloom, constant panic, constant hysteria, thinking that World War III was about to explode, and thinking that, all hope is lost and what have you. Needlessly, completely unnecessary. And obviously thinking that my analysis is wrong and delusional and so forth. But alhamdulillah, the people of Middle Nation have been calm, cool, and collected throughout this entire period. Not being provoked, not allowing themselves to get provoked to fear and confusion and panic from one headline to another, because we have understood what's going on. We've understood the trajectory of what's going on. We've understood the power dynamics. We've understood the global transition. You understand me? We've understood the regional plan.
Suck a dick.
The
Suck a dick.
collective sovereignty that's being built.
Suck a dick.
As I say, we watched the waters, not the boats. We were right then, and alhamdulillah, we're right now. And we saved ourselves a lot of sleepless nights.
Think I'm gonna bother with opinions from drones?
Because we have been objective about.
Are you kidding me?
Analytical about the situation.
There's no value there.
I'm not saying this to boast. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because you might want to not remain trapped in that volatile cycle that you've been in. Driven by emotion, driven by ideology, driven by your inferiority complex, driven by Western epistemology and so forth. Because as long as you're moving in the world with those crippling dependencies, psychological dependencies, well, you're never going to understand what's going on in the world. You'll never understand it at all. And you're never going to find any peace whatsoever in your heart or in your mind. Because that's how they want to keep you in a state like that. Because the Iran situation has now reached a point where I think it's fair to say that the analytical framework that Middle Nation has been using, the framework of the controlled demolition thesis, for example, the managed multipolar transition, the OCGFC, the factional dynamics of the OCGFC, the pragmatists versus hardliners, and so forth. This is no longer a prediction. This is a description of the current reality that we're in.
I don't support domestic terrorism or foreign terrorism.
The IDF is in Lebanon, right? They're in Lebanon, and they say that they're not going to leave. Now, the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, says that the war ends on all fronts, including Lebanon. But Israel says that they're not bound by this agreement. But Israel is obviously economically dependent, completely economically dependent upon continued American support. They're reliant on American arms transfers. And they're completely politically isolated, globally, including isolated from the Gulf states, who now hold the reconstruction capital for the entire region. Even J.D. Vance said, I think it was Vance, he said that no one in the world, no head of state in the world sympathizes with Israel in 2026, and he's right. Trump told Netanyahu, this is documented conversations, Trump told Netanyahu that Syria is a more suitable actor for managing the situation in Lebanon. Syria, think about that. The suggestion from Washington is that the Levant, Bilad al-Sham, historically Iran's sphere of influence through Hezbollah, and the territory that Israel has typically used as the justification for their continuous militant expansionism as, alleged defensive existential necessity and so forth. Now Trump is saying that the Levant should be managed by Syria. Imagine, which is under whose governance? Syria is under whose governance? The post-Assad government has Gulf backing. This is the GCC. GCC management of the Levant essentially replacing Iranian management. The Iranian management, which kept the Israelis' rationale going on and on for their hyped-up conflicts with the existential threat supposedly posed by Hezbollah and so forth. Now that's going to fall under the GCC management. I've told you this was coming. This is literally the architectural shift that I've talked about, the regional architecture, the shift. I've been describing that for years now, and it's happening in front of your face in real time. Even, subhanAllah, bloody Hillary Clinton herself has come out critical of the U.S.-Israel relationship. You wouldn't have seen it coming 3 years ago, except that I told you it was coming. You've got senior voices from the American political establishment, not just the so-called left, not the activists, not fringe figures, but the establishment that are publicly questioning the terms of the relationship between the United States and Israel. I told you they would. This is the political preparation for fundamental restructuring of that relationship. Like I said, we're getting to the good part now. We're getting to the good part. When I analyzed Trump's visit, if you remember, when he visited the Gulf, I said that Netanyahu is being retired because his leadership is incompatible with the economic and the political order that is being built by the GCC. I think Israel is being removed from under American stewardship, and they will be absorbed into the Gulf-led regional architecture of Bilad Hashem. I said Zionism is not being endorsed by the Trump administration, it's being dismantled. You all thought I was out of my mind because, you saw Trump pull out the chair from Netanyahu when they had a meeting, so you thought he was obsequious and what have you because Miriam Adelson gave him some money and whatnot, because you heard Trump say some words, because you don't understand the power dynamics. Okay, now that padded leash on Israel is visible to everyone now. Because Israel is the one that launched the war. They launched a war that ended without their participation in the settlement, in how it ended. You understand? They occupied Lebanon.
No, my hair. I can't grow my hair. No, no.
Their sponsors document. They're watching the whole regional architecture
Fucking
reorganize
clown ass
them,
motherfuckers.
And increasingly, not just without them, but against them. And again, this is what you would have known if you had been listening to Middle Nation, instead of listening to the waswasa in your head and listening to the West. It's been a long and bumpy road, but I said it would be. I said it would be a long and bumpy road, and that long and bumpy road has led to where exactly I told you it was leading to. Alhamdulillah. So let's look at the actual MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding, the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. That's the official name. Because it was officially
go do something
or signed or what have you, brokered.
Go do something.
Which means that it was brokered by Saudi Arabia. Don't get it twisted. That was signed electronically on June 15th, 2026, and then the text was made public. I think 2 or 3 days later. 14 points. You can find them online, but I'll just go through them. Okay, so point 1: the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon. Not a ceasefire. Permanent termination, that's the wording. The word Lebanon appears 3 times in just that opening paragraph of the MOU. And let me just mention here, by the way, that Iran reportedly insisted, and we've seen the statements coming out of Tehran about this. Iran insisted that Lebanon should be included in the MOU. In Lebanon, not Gaza, not Palestine, Lebanon. I just want you to
I just can't speak to retards.
Just you register that for yourself in your mind. This is your big axis of
retard.
Resistance, your big hero and defender of Palestine.
You retard.
The only country standing up against the world for Gaza and what have you, standing up against the West and so forth, standing up for Gaza. And at the moment when they have their greatest leverage, they include Lebanon, not Gaza. 0 demands were made about Gaza in the MOU. Not mentioned one time. Just file that in your minds. Maybe start to understand reality. So, okay, the United States signed this document, and they bound themselves to ensuring the territorial integrity of Lebanon. Now, Israel is not party to this agreement, which already tells you a lot, that they weren't even included in the agreement. But the United States just committed themselves to a framework that requires Israeli military operations in Lebanon to stop. You understand? You see what that is? That's a deliberate maneuver on the part of America to set Israel up to defy America, to facilitate Israel's abandonment. That's what's happening. The Israeli press have already said that they could see Israel facing what amounts to an American embargo in the near future if they fail to comply with the MOU, and no one expects them to comply. That's coming from the right wing, by the way, the hawkish Israeli press. You have to watch these moves. You have to watch how these moves are being made and pay attention, understand what they mean, and understand where they're going.
You dumbass. You dumbass.
In other words, the United States of America and Iran are agreeing to not interfere in each other's internal affairs. Now, for America, that's a formal forfeiture of their claim that they have the right to pursue regime change in Iran. I don't know what it means for Iran in terms of their interference in internal affairs of America, except that they would maybe agree to not release any more Lego videos. But in terms of This is looking at for the MOU. But this pertains to how the new globe, how that's going to be run post transition. I think a lot of people are missing this.